We suffered beyond anything you can imagine, and many died of exposure and starvation. But did you ever hear a survivor of that company utter a word of criticism? Every one of us came through with the absolute knowledge that God lives, for we became acquainted with him in our extremities. I have pulled my handcart when I was so weak and weary from illness and lack of food that I could hardly put one foot ahead of the other. I have looked ahead and seen a patch of sand or a hill slope, and I have said I can only go that far, and there I must give up, for I cannot pull the load through it. I have gone to that sand, and when I reached it, the cart began pushing me. I have looked back many times to see who was pushing my cart, but my eyes saw no one. I knew then that the angels of God were there. Was I sorry that I chose to come by handcart? No. Neither then nor any minute of my life since. The price we paid to become acquainted with God was a privilege to pay, and I am thankful that I was privileged to come in the Martin Handcart Company. It was October, 1845. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as Mormons, gathered in Nauvoo for the church's annual General Conference. But this year's General Conference was different. Less than a year earlier, the president of the church, Joseph Smith, was killed in Carthage, Illinois by a mob, and this conference was largely devoted to preparing for an orderly and unified trek west. Church leaders announced the departure from Illinois and assured members that the exodus was a well-planned move necessary to give the church the room it needed to grow. In fact, the prophet Brigham Young didn't mention persecution as one of the reasons for their exodus. It was an idea that moved the Mormons west, an idea shared by the early Puritans and 19th century American imperialists. American exceptionalism, the belief that the United States had a divine role from God. For Mormons, Manifest Destiny and the trip to the Salt Lake Valley were merely variant spellings of the same thing. In 1845, an unsigned article in a popular American journal, the Democratic Review, issued a call for American expansionism. Focusing mainly on bringing the Republic of Texas into the Union, it declared that expansion represented the fulfillment of our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our yearly multiplying millions. Thus, a powerful American slogan was born. Manifest Destiny became first and foremost a call and justification for an American form of imperialism, and neatly summarized the goals of the Mormon pioneers. It claimed that America had a destiny, manifest from God, to occupy the North American continent south of Canada. But Manifest Destiny was not simply a cloak for American imperialism and a justification for America's territorial ambitions. It also was firmly anchored in a long-standing and deep sense of a special and unique American destiny. The belief that, in the words of historian Conrad Cherry, America is a nation called to a special destiny by God. The notion that there was some providential purpose to the European discovery and eventual conquest of the landmass that was discovered by Europeans was present from the beginning. Both the Spanish and the French monarchs authorized and financed exploration of the New World because, among other things, they considered it their divinely appointed mission to spread Christianity to the New World by converting the natives to Christianity. Coming several hundred years later, the British, and especially the New England Puritans, carried with them a demanding sense of providential purpose, and less than 200 years later did the Mormons head west with the same sense of purpose. John Winthrop, governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, gave the clear statement of the idea that God had charged the English settlers in New England with a special and unique providential mission. In his writings, On Board the Arabella on the Atlantic Ocean, 1630, Winthrop delivered the blueprint for what was dubbed an errand into the wilderness, which set the framework for most of the later versions of the idea that America had been providentially chosen for a special destiny. Winthrop delivered his sermon just before he and his fellow passengers disembarked on the shore of Boston Harbor, the place, Winthrop proposed, to which God had called them to build up a model Bible commonwealth for Protestants in England and elsewhere to emulate. Thus stands the cause between God and us. We are entered into covenant with him for this work. We have taken out a commission, he declared, adding, "If the Lord shall please to hear us and bring us in peace to the place we desire, then hath he ratified this covenant and sealed our commission, and will expect a strict performance of the articles contained in it." He went on to specify more fully what fidelity to this commission entailed. The people of New England must follow the counsel of Micah, to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. For this end we must be knit together in this work as one man. We must entertain each other in brotherly affection. We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the supply of others' necessities. But it is near the end of the speech that he coined the phrase that has been invoked again and again to express the idea of America's providential uniqueness and destiny. "If we are faithful to our mission," he says, "we shall find that the God of Israel is among us, when tens of us shall be able to resist 1,000 of our enemies, when he shall make us a praise and a glory, that men shall say of succeeding plantations, the Lord make it like New England, for we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill, the eyes of all people upon us." In the decades following Winthrop's speech, most New England sermons preached less about New England's divine mission and more about how far New Englanders had fallen from fulfilling the requirements of their covenant with God, and how all the woes and turmoil that had befallen them were the signs and result of God's wrath over their failings. However, in the midst of what came to be referred to as the Great Awakening, the idea that God had chosen America for a special destiny was resurrected in a new form. In the midst of the awakening, the great New England theologian and revivalist Jonathan Edwards wrote that the latter-day glory, or the end times that would bring the second coming of Christ to earth, would begin in America. It is not likely that this work of God's Spirit, so extraordinary and wonderful, Edwards asserted, is the dawning, or at least a prelude, of that glorious work of God, so often foretold in Scripture, which in the progress and issue of it shall renew the world of mankind. Leading preachers of the Second Great Awakening that swept across the United States over much of the first half of the 19th century reasserted the claim that America would be the site of the millennium and that the awakening was its sure sign. They, however, gave their idea of the millennium a particular American twist. Just as Winthrop tied the idea of New England's providential mission to the character of the Christian commonwealth they were charged to establish, so too did millennialists like Lyman Beecher describe the society that would bring forth the millennium as the American Republic, thus conjoining the coming of the millennium with the spread and triumph of American liberty and democracy. In his 1832 book, The Plea for the West, Beecher stated that at first he had thought Edwards' prediction chimerical, but now thought all providential developments since, and all the existing signs of the times, lend corroboration to it. But if it is by the march of revolution and civil liberty that the way of the Lord is to be prepared, where shall the central energy be found, and from what nation shall the renovating power go forth? Beecher's answer was clear. This nation is, in the providence of God, destined to lead the way in the moral and political emancipation of the world. The relation between God and nation, in this millennialist formulation, is both subtle and somewhat ambiguous. The fusion between God's will and the nation's democratic character gives divine sanction to the United States' secular arrangements of liberty and democracy. At the same time, it makes the nation itself an instrument in the coming of the millennium. It was the Mormons, however, who gave the fullest expression to the idea of America as the site of the millennium. The prophecies in Book of Mormon delivered to Joseph Smith and his subsequent organization of the Mormon Church marked the beginning of the end times, as the formal name of the new religion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, makes unmistakably clear. After violent persecution in Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, Brigham Young led the Mormons into the wilderness of Utah and there established a new city upon a hill. A new Zion, which, as Conrad Cherry put it, was the holy city in the wilderness that was for Young the gathering place for the saints from which they would radiate influences that would turn the entire American continent and eventually the world into God's Zion.